So I watched Krull the other day. I really liked this movie as a kid, and I was prepared to have the memory thrashed and shat upon with a lifetime's distance from it. But it holds up better than I expected. It's absolutely cheesy, but the cheese is just one layer in a stack of seemingly mismatched pieces. Like a burger. The story begins with one of those marriages to unify two warring kingdoms. Only in this case, it's the prince and princess themselves who are arranging the political union against the wishes of their respective king dads.
If it were anyone but Turrell's son.
These primitive screwheads probably would have been content to fight each other for generations, but the young'uns realize they need to join forces now that their world is being invaded by aliens.
Father, the invaders are destroying our world. We must have the alliance. Only if we're united do we stand a chance against them.
Yeah, it's all the fantasy tropes except for the big Dark Lord baddie actually arrives in a giant stone spaceship and lands on the planet. It's an interesting detail that we'll come back to. So, Prince Stripey Tight Pants here arrives to meet Princess Plot Device for the first time.
I've chosen well.
So have I.
They have the ceremony that evening, which involves this detail.
I give fire to water. It will not return, except from the hand of the woman I choose as my wife.
But a bunch of sluggos crash the wedding. They call them slayers, but I always think sluggos because... After some swords and lasers, they abscond with the princess because aliens wanting human women is a trope that must be honored. And to be fair, Krull does use a prophecy to hang this on.
That a girl of ancient name shall become queen, that she shall choose a king, and that together they shall rule our world, and that their son shall rule the galaxy.
So there could be some politico-mystic motive on the part of the beast as the film's big bad is known. Now Colwyn, the prince, has his familiar quest. Rescue the damsel, defeat the beast, become king. But our Skywalker needs his Obi-Wan. Enter Ynyr.
I am Ynyr.
The old one.
Well, not as old as all that.
He tends to his suitably minor wounds and hands him the kingly bling. Now get up and get questing. Step 1, retrieve the Act 1 magical MacGuffin from a mountain cave because we need something iconic to use in the marketing materials. Laser swords are already taken. A lightning spear is too clumsy for the hero to lug around when not fighting. It really needs to be something that can be held dramatically in one hand. A laser dagger would just be kinda sad. So a big bejeweled shuriken it is, which they call the glaive. With the warm-up quest complete, the new king and his mentor set out on the main quest. He accretes an entourage of followers to aid him, for example, the aspiring sorcerer and pie pilferer Urgo.
There was a difference of opinion concerning a gooseberry pie. The man left it sitting on his windowsill. What did he expect?
Perhaps expected to eat it.
And a pack of more serious criminals.
Let's just kill them and be done with it, Torquil.
Saffron! I don't kill men without good reason.
You're escaped prisoners.
Everyone. Thieves, bandits, fighters, and brawlers.
But he convinces them to join his quest with a winning smile. We few, we proud, we band of brigands. Also, there's a Cyclops. He comes and goes. All the makings of a simple swords and sorcery epic are here. Let's go fight all the monsters on the way to the Dark Lord's lair. Only they can't just go charging up to the beast's fortress. The castle, spaceship, whatever, appears in a new location each day, and they have no way of knowing where. They have no idea where to go. The problem they face isn't one of manpower, tactics, or even logistics, but of information. They need intel. And they're gonna get it from this wizard that can tell them one day in advance where the fortress will next appear. In magical terms, he's scrying, but in practice, it's signals intelligence. They're in a war where heroism and individual fighting skill depend on information gathering. But the beast has his own SigInt happening and not only traces the data breach, but deploys countermeasures. Yet it's not completely hopeless.
His power is too great for you to overcome.
Yes, here. But there's one place where his power cannot reach.
The Emerald Temple.
Is it a magic place, or does it just have better equipment? In practical terms, it's the same thing. What Krull has done is say, alright, this is a story about extraterrestrial invaders against a less advanced civilization. Classic science fiction story, but they keep everything firmly inside the fantasy framework. If we see lizard men shooting mounted knights with laser cannons mounted on helicopters, we understand that. We have a framework for what's happening. But by framing it all in terms of wizardry, it's easier to relate to the heroes of the story because we don't understand what their enemy is doing either. We're not watching it always thinking, if you can just get a hold of some of their machine guns and a few trucks, you can close the tech gap, or something rooted in our own understanding of our own world. Krull manages to depict a technological gap without making one side's technology familiar to us. The greatly expanded party sets off toward this emerald palace, inexplicably built in the middle of a swamp.
It is in the Great Swamp, a treacherous place.
But they get ambushed on the way, there's the obligatory quicksand, and they lose their wizard. The Cyclops arrives to save the day, but Operation Emerald Palace is a dismal failure. Until Ynyr reveals that he has a plan B he's been sitting on the whole time.
The widow of the web.
That creature helps no one. And none who go there return.
She has great powers.
To kill.
She may not kill me.
And this is one of the more interesting character narratives of this film. During their conversation, it's established that Ynyr and the widow of the web, Lissa as she was known in her younger days, were romantically involved, but he left. Out of duty, ambition, commitment issues, we don't really know.
But you would not stay with me.
There were responsibilities, duty.
Ambition.
She gave birth to their son and promptly killed the kid, earning her the spider gig as punishment.
I killed him when he was born. And this is my punishment?
Punishment by whom, I always wondered. Is there some organization that punishes infanticide in complex ways, like trapping the offender inside a web guarded by a giant spider? Are there vengeful gods doing this? What's the difference, practically speaking? Perhaps more than any other narrative thread, this one makes me wonder about the world of Krull, makes me curious about how it works in its history. Yeah, Krull is the name of the planet. That's where the title comes from. It's kind of like making a World War II movie and calling it Earth. Anyway, Spider-Woman can hack the beastnet way better than that old green wizard that got shut down in seconds.
The Black Fortress, where does it rise?
Tomorrow. In the Iron Desert.
With barely a moment's effort, she pulls tomorrow's Black Fortress appearance out of the air. It almost makes you think that they should have gone straight there instead of getting a bunch of people killed in the swamp with this whole Emerald Palace thing, but I think it ends up being a nice little insight into Ynyr. Because he knows. Between that and the hints of his youthful indiscretions and selfish decisions, we see that he's not quite the selfless mentor figure. Ynyr is helping Colwyn, but he has his own motivations that go beyond just being helpful. I wonder about Ynyr's life, his mistakes and their consequences, and what compromises and compulsions brought him to where he is when the film begins. Whatever the case, they now have a destination. They bag some exceptionally fast flying horses and set out to save the world. They storm the fortress, Liam Neeson dies along with a bunch of other dudes, and Colwyn uses the glaive to cut through an otherwise impenetrable shield, fights the beast, and loses the glaive because he's not strong enough with the force to yank it back. But wait.
It's not the glaive, it's you.
Melissa, it's us. It's us he can't defeat.
I did say it was cheese. So they finish the wedding ceremony right there, and through the power of incredibly fast-blooming love conveniently bursting forth in a political marriage, they barbecue the beast and save Krull. Getting married on Krull gives a magic fireball spell, apparently. With the beast defeated, the fortress collapses, upward, at a rate just slow enough to allow for a dramatic escape, and they jump out into a flowery meadow and all is well.
You are his queen?
Yes.
Then we won.
Yes.
And then this happens.
The key's yours.
Only the king and his lord marshal carry this key.
That's right.
What's the difference between a violent criminal and an enforcer for the state? Sometimes nothing but the king's favor. And as though they realize the implications, they turn their backs to us, the epic James Horner theme comes up, and they prance off into the grass. Krull is not a great film. But it is a great example of 1980s fantasy cinema that includes everything from Muppety movies like The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth to barbarian heroes like Conan and the Beastmaster. The decade was kind of a golden age for fantasy cinema, and like many of those films, Krull doesn't worry too much about the world building. It gives just enough to hang the story on and tells it without any pretensions. If something looks cool, it's in. Don't get hung up on the consistency. 80s fantasy wasn't afraid to go dark. The never-ending stories, Swamp of Sadness, for example, or The Fate of the Princess in Dragon Slayer. But it was usually done to accent an essentially uplifting story. That element of playfulness, of fun, has largely seeped out of modern big-budget fantasy. No one wants to visit Westeros, and for all the intrigues of the story told in the recent Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, it lacks that sense of wonder and whimsy of the original film. The Hobbit movies tried, but they also tried to be a serious prequel to The Lord of the Rings at the same time, and they couldn't quite strike the balance of the original Hobbit story, which is really quite simple. Harry Potter probably comes closest to capturing that feel this century. Krull, like so many of the fantasy films of its era, manages to play with some interesting ideas without getting mired in them. It doesn't try to be anything more than spectacle and choreographed fights with an epic score. In short, it's an artifact of a different time. Not a simpler or a better time exactly, just a different world when a movie could just be a movie.
He covers a lot of ground.